I'm excited to bring to you today my next interview series on innovation. I thought this would be a critical discussion, being in the midst of a pandemic with still unknown implications for the global economy. Businesses are hunkered down right now, managing through this crisis. However, over the long term, delivering to value to shareholders, employees, and societies requires growth, and growth requires innovation. I have two amazing guests today who are experts in their field on innovation, and you are going to want to listen and take notes because these two have valuable insights on helping your businesses. First, I'd like to introduce you to Soon Yu. He is an international speaker and award-winning author on innovation and design and a Forbes contributor. His book, Iconic Advantage, challenges businesses to refocus their innovation priorities on building greater iconicity and offers deeper insights on establishing timeless distinction and relevance. If you haven't read it yet, it's a great framework for marketers to take action. He most recently served as the Global VP of Innovation at VF Corporation and the General Manager at Chiquita and the Clorox Company. Welcome, Soon. So glad to have you part of this discussion.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me on.
And then next, Natalie Roesler. She currently serves as the VP of Innovation at Surlean Foods, a food manufacturer that creates customized meat, sauces, and sides. Natalie has an impressive 18 years of research and development experience with the food industry, leading the innovation and product design across various channels and products. She has a new blog out, love the name of this, Natalie, pineapplecourage.com, that helps professionals be courageous, have vital conversations, and live more fulfilling lives. So check it out if you get a chance. Welcome, Natalie, to the conversation.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So with that, let's get started. So this pandemic has impacted nearly every aspect of life, from personal, how people live to work, to professional, how companies interact with their customers, to how customers choose and purchase products and services right now. And, you know, it's expected that the fallout from COVID-19 will fundamentally change the way we do business over the next 5 years. But this is also going to create significant new opportunities for growth. So with that, what innovation trends are you seeing coming out of this year? Soon, I'll just shoot that over to you first.
Sure. Well, with the whole pandemic and obviously people working at home, I mean, some of the trends people are seeing right away, which is, how do you have much more of a virtual work environment? And so all the tools and I think capabilities required to pull that off, and so we're going to see a lot more of that. I think this idea of if you haven't, if you're not a digital native, then you're being introduced to the idea of digital transformation overnight, and you basically have to figure out how you can make your business relevant virtually and online. And so those are obviously two huge trends that are happening. The pandemic itself is obviously throwing into the idea of health and safety, and so there's going to be a lot of opportunities in that area, and then in order how to give people the same degree of confidence they had prior to ever experiencing a pandemic. Other things and trends that I've seen, that I've talked to a lot of other people about, it's the fact that if we're going so virtual and so digital, how do we actually provide more humanity in this environment of being overly digital? And I know mental health, loneliness, these are all going to become, at the forefront of how we manage our employees, how we manage our families. And then lastly, I can't even start to fathom, I have I should say 9, he's 11-year-old. He's going to kill me. 11-year-old.
Better see this.
Yeah, he's distant learning. And I think that generation growing up with the impact of being in COVID and, and having to socially distant and distant learning, I don't know what that's going to mean in terms of education and how we raise our kids. So I think those are some pretty major trends, and I'm sure now that you're seeing some of the same things, and especially in the food industry where that's such a vital and essential part of keeping us healthy and actually keeping us feeling connected, right?
Right, right. And it's interesting that you talk about health and safety and humanity and mental health and loneliness. And I think it's really impacting the world today. And how do you have those conversations, and how do you start to shift the dialogue and start to transform companies to address that? That's a really big thing, that's not being fully recognized right now, you know? So
Absolutely.
I think it's dead
Agreed.
on. Natalie?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Soon said about kind of the macro impacts of COVID. I will take a little more micro approach to my answer, which is around the food industry itself. Our particular company does custom development for large restaurant chains, and I'm sure you can think of some. And so there's been a lot of change there. Of course, there's been, it was complete shutdown and just drive-through, carry out, delivery. And so many chains, if they weren't already on the digital route and having apps and partnering with delivery partners, they had to do that very quickly. Some other impacts we've seen is reduction in menus. They're looking for, in order to keep their team members safe, they may not have as much labor, margins are tight, sales aren't as high, so they've reduced menus and to just kind of streamline and make it more simple. So they're removing things from menus. If you look at a menu of a casual dining restaurant today, you're going to see it's been reduced quite a bit. So that's been one impact. I also saw in May, we had some volatility with meat market prices. And that was when on the retail stores, you couldn't necessarily get meat, or were only 2 packages. The impact that has had has been positive and beneficial on the plant-based side of things, which we were already seeing to be trending, the Impossible, the Beyond, and there's a lot of different companies that come out with their own plant-based products. But I think it drove that a little bit further because there was this fear that there may not be enough protein. Now we've since recovered from that. That's not an issue. We've kind of ironed things out, but that was an impact for sure. And then you're seeing a lot of, family type meals. Pick it up, take it home to my family, and things that are easy. You were talking about virtual schooling, easy things for kids at home. So that's impacting the retail market. Interestingly enough, I've seen our local supermarket chain, it's called H-E-B here in San Antonio, and Costco, they're all installing more open refrigerated front units or freezer units. And so that to me says they're looking for more ready to eat, refrigerated frozen products that are easy to prepare at home because people are eating at home more. So those are some major things I saw in the food industry, and we continue to see, and we're having to adapt and trying to think about safety as we develop new products. How do we make it safe, repeatable in the back of the restaurant kitchen, and the easiest on labor, because labor's also hard to come by right now.
Right. And meal kits, right? Meal kits have probably seen
Yes.
a surge in growth as well, right?
Absolutely, yes. The ones you order online or ones you pick up at the grocery store. We also saw partnering at grocery stores with local restaurant chains. So they actually bring prepared meals from those restaurants and sell them in the grocery store. I don't know if you've seen that around you, but it's definitely been true here in Texas.
And then also cooking, online cooking, and people are getting more into that with how to prepare more meals at home too. That's a trend as well.
Yes, it is. So
Yeah.
it's all around. I think that we kind of went through the baking phase and now we're coming down off of that. But I still think there is more cooking going on. I remember there was a time I had to have a friend of mine ship me a jar of yeast because I couldn't get anywhere nearby.
Right,
So.
right. Sourdough seemed to be a big thing. Sourdough bread.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah. So for many, the toughest leadership test seems to be how to bring back businesses in an environment here where we don't even have a vaccine yet, or and our economies seem to be still reeling, right? How should companies reimagine their innovation business model as they return to this full speed for their business?
I'll go first. So there's been a few things that we've had to do. Of course, from beginning of March, we had lots of additional PPE, sanitation, social distancing, working from home if needed. So you've got to apply all of those things that will keep people safe and healthy. In the development space, there's been a few things that we've done differently. Of course, we have our developers working in our kitchens and our labs and with social distancing, but continuing to work on projects for customers. What we found was the most challenge is most of our customers are working from home. And the thing about that is that if you want to send samples or if you want to keep projects moving, you've got to ship them direct to their homes. So we had to pivot quite a bit. We had to get creative. We created custom gift boxes that when we send samples out to show new ideas to our customers, we put them in these, beautiful boxes with handwritten cards and little gifts. And we've shipped them, one customer we shipped to 26 different homes. And then we held a virtual presentation. We demonstrated the products. A lot of them were standing in their kitchen, preparing the products at the same time, tasting them and giving us feedback through chat. So we really had to pivot into how to get in front of the customer, continue to be in front of them, be a face. And even though we may not have gotten an exact project or a product out of that particular virtual presentation, right now we're bearing the fruits of that, where those customers are calling us because we've stayed in front of them. We've shown we can be innovative. We've shown we can continue to move our process along. And they're calling us now, hey, we have a new brief. Can you work on this with us? So we really had to pivot in that way and understand where the customer is and come to where they are. Another example is when we sent those gift boxes, we had to think about sample size. We're only sending about a ½ pound a sample. Typically in food manufacturing, you might send 10 or 20 pounds. People don't have room for that in their individual fridges at home. So we had to be really creative in how we got in front of the customer, and we're feeling very good about our project pipeline right now.
I think that's an important point, is pivoting to where the customer's needs are and the consumer's needs are through this time, and making sure that you're going to them and not the other way around. I think that's a very good point. Soon?
Yeah, I just want to build on what Natalie said. I think her example is such a great example of, one way to really bring innovation to the forefront of what you're doing, especially in times of change and transformation and crisis. And in those times, obviously, what's changing probably the most is consumer behavior, consumer attitudes. And so staying very close to how that's changing, understanding what of that is sort of a temporal thing and what are the changes that, quite frankly, are structural. And then thinking about how whatever your product, your service is, especially if you're a B2C type of a company, just trying to understand how you stay relevant, given whether it's a temporary change or a structural change to those consumers. I think, in some ways, change is difficult, obviously, but also if you have the right mindset about change, it's also the time where I've seen the most accelerated and the most amount of innovation actually happen.
Right.
Where I've actually seen companies that were maybe in the middle of the pack embrace the situation because they didn't have as many legacies as, say, the big players. And they really just thought hard about, okay, what's changing with the consumers? Because we're a small organization, it's going to allow us to basically pivot towards that, run some experiments around some of these different needs, and build some potentially scalable ideas based on that. So, in some ways, not having a big organization and being, call it middle or smaller, actually gives you the opportunity to not worry about legacy. And I actually seen a lot of middle to smaller companies be very successful in times of transition, crisis, and transformation, especially if they do what Natalie says, stay close to their consumers and actually see what they want and where they're going and what they need. So absolutely.
And what do you think some of the pitfalls are companies that they encounter when change happens like this, and they run into challenges with the consumer and not staying close? Like what can we advise them in terms of how to pivot and how to stay close to them? Like, what have you seen in terms of the pitfalls for some of the larger companies?
Sure. What I see as pitfalls in terms of the whole innovation function and trying to bring that to life in any companies, pretty similar whether they're large or small. I think it gets exacerbated when it's a larger company, and I think it gets exacerbated when there are major times of change and upheaval in the market. And you know, you go back to Xerox and you think about the Xerox example. You know, they actually had some of the best ideas in the world. They actually invented the mouse. They invented the internet. They invented a whole bunch of things, the PC, and so. But they weren't actually able to commercialize any of those things. And it's not because they didn't have enough money. It's not because they didn't have some really smart people. They had the, you know, they call it the innovation park, and they had all the money, all the people, and capabilities and talents. The key issue is that they ran into a mindset that, you know, people call them three walls or three barriers that people run into, and they're usually generated by fear, you know, fear of the unknown, fear that, hey, something might cannibalize my existing business. Also this idea that just lack of enthusiasm, given there's so many, you know, when people look at their portfolio of things to do, the innovation stuff tends to be farther out, more risky, you know, the payout isn't quite there. And so in big organizations that are hugely successful, they've got a machine that's churning out money all the time, and the CFO, the CEO, everyone's going to be a little more inclined to focus on that side of it. So I think that inertia, okay, both against new ideas or more sort of a desire to keep what's made them successful and protect that and to nourish that, those mindsets make actually innovation really difficult. And I just think because of what's happening, both the speed and the amount of transformation that's happening in the marketplace, when you already have that type of, call it tendency to throw up those walls and those barriers, they get erected even faster, I think, because people a little bit deer in the headlights, they just don't have the muscles. They don't have the training to be nimble because they have so much success and legacy to sort of call upon. And so I feel like actually sometimes, you know, really successful and big companies have a real hard time with upheaval.
You know, and it's funny that you talk about the change, the mindset, right? Because it is a mindset for transformation, right? And in order to be successful, you have to have that transformational mindset. So can you both share with me effective approaches to change management that drives that culture of innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go first. So, you know, I think that the only way you get through any change is through a high level of trust and respect with the team. It's really hard to build that when you need it. You have to build it from the beginning, and it comes down to culture. It comes down to how you treat your team members. And so that's imperative, but you've got to share any news, any information you have when you have it, not to freak people out, but so that they don't feel like you're withholding information in a time of uncertainty. So, you know, share the information, share the plan, share that you're going to have to be flexible, that you really don't know what the future is going to hold, but, you know, we're going to take some action. We're going to do something versus using something like the pandemic as an excuse. I have heard that quite a bit. Oh, well, we can't call on them because they're all working from home and, you know, they're not in the right mindset. Our customer's not in the right. Well, you know, we're all doing the same thing. And if we can stay creative, not that you need to hassle anybody, but if, you know, you show up on a social media feed or you drop them an email, hey, how's it going? I know there was a lot of that went on in the first couple months of the pandemic because people weren't innovating. They were just trying to survive. You know, they're trying to get their supply chains to be filled. They were trying to get, you know, sales. I mean, they were just trying to recover. They aren't ready to innovate. But if you're there and just, hey, is there anything I can do to help you? In some cases there were, hey, do you know a supplier of such and such? Can you help me with that? That's going to stick around. But within your team, you've got to have that trust. You got to just share with them often what's going on, what direction the company is headed in, how they add to that. And then the other piece with the trust is you have to be willing to delegate. You have to be willing that if mistakes are made, that someone's head's not going to be lopped off. that, they are in a trusted, safe place, and we need their ideas and we need them to act. So to me, it all comes down to trust and culture, being open, lots of communication, and letting your team help you succeed. And I'm always blown away by, you set high expectations. I'm always blown away by how people still exceed them.
Yeah, and definitely that trust. I've seen that so many times. When people feel safe, they go beyond and feel much more collaborative and willing, to your point, do more. They wanna strive and do for the organization. I do have a question though. If the culture is of not being an innovative culture is driven from the top, right? How do you change that?
It's got to change from the top. The person at the top has to put trust in the people underneath them. And that can be very difficult if they're set in their ways and they've been leading in a certain way for their entire career. That may not work out for the future, for the survival of the business, to be honest with you. Your leaders and the quality of your leaders and how well they can build trust and mutual respect, that's going to dictate how successful you're going to be through any change, whether it's COVID, if you're implementing new software systems. We've all heard of, the Achilles heels of different things you can do in business, changing channels. All of that has to be driven from the top with very positive messaging and a lot of trust.
Yeah. Soon, anything else to add on this?
I think Natalie nailed it. There's a book, I think it's called The Speed of Trust, and I forgot who wrote it, but it was really about the idea that the most important determination, or the most important factor in the speed of an organization is how much trust they have in each other. And when you have an organization that has high levels of trust, man, you can pivot on a dime, and there's no question about that. And I've unfortunately not always been in that environment. VF is a large organization. It has over 30 different brands when I was working there at the time, North Face, Vans, Timberland, Seven for Mankind. And when I entered, it was a situation where the brands didn't necessarily trust corporate or trust each other. Okay, they had their own cultures. You got to think about the fashionista at Seven for Mankind is not the, tattoo artist at Vans is not the rock climber at the North Face, right? And so not only were the products geared after different lifestyles, the people working in there reflected those lifestyles, and they didn't necessarily all, translate and communicate. And oftentimes early on, corporate actually played one brand against another. Oh, Vans, North Face grew at 12%. Why aren't you growing at 12%? So, it actually fostered an environment where trust wasn't always there. And coming into that type of environment, it would have been ideal to have teams and corporate and the divisions have a lot more trust. Not having that, I honestly had to rely on other techniques. You might even call them manipulation. That's fine. I don't care what you call them. I'm trying to move the organization in the right direction. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. And two books were really instrumental for me in terms from developing tactics to move a large organization like that. And one was by the author Chip Heath and Dan Heath called Switch. It's really the premier book on how to make change happen when change is really hard. And they talk about a lot of techniques that are used to move organizations from one place to another. And they talk about this analogy of an elephant, a 150-pound rider on top of an elephant, trying to get the elephant to move from point A to point B. And the rider on top actually represents our analytical side, and the elephant actually represents more our emotional side. And so it's important that, one, you don't have too much analytical information in too many directions where the rider doesn't actually know how to go from point A to point B. You want to keep the directions really simple so you don't overwhelm the rider. So what if the rider knows how to go from point A to point B? You still got this 2-ton elephant to move, right? And, a good analogy is like, dieting or trying to quit smoking. I mean, you know what to do when it comes to dieting. You got to exercise, probably eat less and eat healthier. but you know, at 11 p.m. at night, and you're hungry, and that piece of chocolate cake that's left over is calling at you. I mean, that's the elephant talking, right? So a lot of what they talk about is how do you actually get the elephant there? How do you get the emotional side there? And that was really important. And the other book that was really helpful was it's a very old book, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends. And
oh God, yes.
You know, one of the key takeaways for that is, you know, if you have an idea, the best way to get it done is make it other people's ideas. And so that was a lot of, you know, I'll share this with you and on this, but oftentimes I knew that I was going to present a big initiative and try to get momentum and get people buy-in on that. And I'd always imagined the most important meeting with the CEO and maybe his 11 direct reports sitting across from me as I was presenting. So I would have a plan months in advance of basically going out and meeting with those 11 people. Some of them were excited about it, most were not. I would take fastidious notes, and by the time I got to that meeting, I would make sure that in that presentation of the recommendation that I would have spoken everybody in that room at least twice, sometimes 3 times. For my detractors, I'd often say, you know, I was really going down this path, and, you know, I knew I was right here, but I talked to Bob, and Bob said, you might not want to do that because of this one. And you know what, Bob, you were right. I wasted some money here. I really, you know, thank you, Bob, you know. And so I give the detractors, you know, and sometimes it come out with a new principle. I'd name it after Bob. This is the Bob theorem, you know? And so, and then obviously people that were excited about it, I would put their quotes up, you know, as a testimonial. So, you know, through the course of that recommendation, everyone had heard their name like at least 2 to 3 times. And so when the CEO looked around the room and said, anyone have any objections or any questions? It was really hard for people to criticize because they were seen as co-creators, which, you know, for whatever that recommendation was. And so that's kind of the stuff I learned from the Dale Carnegie stuff. And yeah, it might be a little bit manipulative, but, you know, actually the ideas did become better because I infused other people's critiques and feedback into the idea. And it may not have been exactly perfect, but it was shared. And I think that was much more important than it being perfect.
Well, I think it diffuses, right? It diffuses the detractors because you are bringing their ideas on board and, you know, bringing down their barriers because you're bringing in their ideas. I love it. I love it. So I think those are great suggestions for people out there who, you know, need to, you know, are challenged and faced with people who don't want to, you know, go forward with a plan of action out there. And that's how you kind of bring everybody on board. I think both of you have great suggestions in that really tough place to kind of pivot that mindset that people need right now in this time of being quick and fast to market. So love it. Those are great suggestions. Thank you. So, you know, again, during these disruptive times, right, we need to find, I guess, you know, how can leaders really exhibit the greatest influence to drive efficiency, collaboration, and innovation? And, you know, we probably talked a lot about this, but is there anything else you might want to add about being kind of the effective leaders we need to be in terms of kind of the innovation cheerleaders and drivers?
Yeah, so a few of the things that I've learned along the way throughout, you know, this last 8 months has been, you've got to be flexible. Working remotely, and I have team members who are not sitting in the same office as me here in Texas. And so also connecting with them intentionally, so they feel connected, they feel valued, because it's easy when you're working alone to feel alone and to start, you know, you start having those mental cycles. I don't know if you guys have ever had them, but I think we all have them, where you get stuck on one little negative thought, and before you know it, you know, you're going to be fired by the end of the day. So we have this, you know, they have a need. And so I intentionally would connect with them. I would text them or call them, you know, try to connect with them more regularly, just because regular business wasn't having us connect as often, or we weren't running into each other in the hallway, for example. So connect with the people, be flexible. Don't use COVID as an excuse. Just keep, you know, and if you don't know what to do, come up with some new ideas and try them. One of the major pivots in COVID early on was we have no marketing department. And I thought, you know what? We're going to start a social media campaign and I'm going to start writing posts. So I did. And, and we've actually had some inquiries based on things people saw on LinkedIn. So I didn't know what else to do while my customers were trying to figure out, what they were going to do. I needed something to keep us busy. And so get creative, keep, swinging for the fence, and one of these things is going to hit. So as a leader, be an example of that. Trust your team. Don't be afraid to delegate. And most importantly, don't micromanage them, especially if there's less work. Don't be following up with them every 5 minutes. You'll drive them crazy. So you've got to really keep your good leadership skills in check, continue to trust your team, and they're, as things recover, and they definitely have for us, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I kind of just want to build on what Natalie said about this idea of trust. From a structural framework, sometimes, I worked with our CEO when I was working at VF, and think of it as a pyramid. And I spent some time with Roger Martin. He's this guru on both innovation, design thinking, and strategy. He was a former dean at the Rotman School. He was the head of strategy basically at Procter when A.G. Lafley was there. And he basically has this theory that in most organizations, there's sort of two types of individuals. One's called a validity person, the other's a reliability person. 90% of the organization is probably on the reliability side, meaning taking what is known and making it even more efficient and more reliable. And then there's a side that you bring in that are the dreamers, the visionaries, the artists, the creatives, and they're more on the validity side. They're out just seeking truths that may not be self-evident. And because they're not so self-evident, they try and experiment, and almost everybody goes, well, that's not self-evident. Why would you do that? To see maybe there is truth there. I want to make a discovery. And so if you can figure out a way within your organization to carve out, just call it the tip of the pyramid, where you let everyone know, hey, this is where we're having, you don't want to call them the truth seekers, but you'll say the creatives, try some new stuff, okay? But 90% of what we're spending money on in our time is still going to be on the stuff we are making money on, right? So just, if you can carve out that little bit of space and protect both the people and the ideas that are sort of going after the new truths, it makes it both more digestible for the people that are reliability people to understand, okay, it's like compartmentalizing. That's 10%. I'm not going to worry about it. The CEO pet project, of course, we got to, and even in the back of their mind, they rationally know we've got to be doing some things going for the fences, because otherwise, if we just continue with our day-to-day, it may not be enough, right? And so it's like putting a bet in the future. So I think that's really important. And another thing that Natalie said that I thought was really critical in terms of how she was connecting with their team and reaching out. I think that's so important right now, because I always tell my team when I was working with them that in every meeting, there's two things that are happening. One is the content of the meeting, like the work that needs to be done, the analysis, the data, the dashboards, the logic, whatever. But then the other side, there's the relationship that's happening between the people in the room. And I feel like with these virtual offices and virtual meetings, that a lot of the content is actually getting done and done much more efficiently. What's missing, though, is a lot of the relationship part. So you're doing great on the content, but I feel like the relationship part is suffering. And I've now helped a couple organizations where there was like a few employees that have never actually met face to face with, they're new. They have never met face to face with the team. So they don't understand the unspoken rules or the culture. And so, they don't feel as connected. And so, exactly what Natalie is saying, how do we make sure that we make that extra effort to add back in the relationship quotient in every meeting? And I do think that's going to be important, because it's really easy. I got another Zoom call. We're Zoom calling all the time, that you're so focused on content, you don't take the time out and sort of, how do we add the humanity back into the face-to-face, right?
Yeah. So this has been just an amazing conversation. I thank you both. I think there's some really key things I want to just capture from our conversation. the trends that we discussed that are really key here is digital transformation, health and safety, mental health, plant-based food, family meals. I think those are important for people to grasp onto in terms of innovation. In terms of kind of the business model here, staying close to the consumer behaviors and attitudes in terms of accelerating the change of innovation. That's going to be key for businesses that we discussed. And then the mindset, the change and the mindset and the culture, really important, that trust in the organization, having that trust in each other and being able to pivot on a dime. That's going to be important. And then the talk about being a leader and influencing through the flexibility and the delegating and all of that we just talked about right now, so important for people to take away. So I thank you both. Is there anything else that you would like to add as we wrap up here?
I just appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. It was really great to hear Sue's ideas as well. And I can't wait to read the book. I've got to order me one. So thank you.
Those are great book suggestions.
Yes, I took several down.
and how to, of course, win friends from Dale Carnegie. That's always a great one. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I also just want to echo the gratitude. Thanks, Lisa, for bringing us together. Natalie, so nice to meet you. And it's so wonderful to meet kindred spirits in terms of people that are going after the new truths, right? And sometimes it can feel lonely out there when you're dealing with an organization that has efficiency or reliability concerns at the forefront, and you're asking them to try something new. It can be challenging at times. Yeah, so it's very nice to meet some compadres in this.
Absolutely.
You both so much. It's been such a pleasure. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.